I'm Guy Johnson from Bloomberg Television and Radio, and I'm delighted to be joined for this look ahead by Shai Weiss, the CEO of Virgin Atlantic. Shai, Happy New Year. Welcome to the Bloomberg Year Ahead. Thank you for taking some time to join us here with your thoughts. Let's talk about the year ahead. 2020, 2021, two incredibly tough years. What does this year look like?
Well, indeed, recovering from the pandemic will take a bit of time, but I think we are now more hopeful towards 2022 on the back of, I think, better news with respect to Omicron and the fact that at least in the UK, cases are going down. The NHS, while being strained, is dealing and coping miraculously with the situation. And of course, changes to the restrictions on travel, which have been removed here in the UK and in other places on January the 5th, give us indication that this year should be a better year than 2021 and 2020.
In terms of the amount of pent-up demand there is, we've had 2 years of people not flying and not flying long haul in particular. In terms of the kind of demand that you're expecting to see, what are the early indications?
Well, first of all, we're on the back of December. And December was the best month we've had since February of 2020, which tells you that things are starting to improve. And pent-up demand is there. People have not really treated themselves to, in large parts of the population, to a great vacation or even to business trips for 2 years. Now, it's undetermined yet how it all manifests itself in 2022, but I'm looking at the numbers after the announcements here in the United Kingdom. Numbers are, in terms of selling tickets, are back to where they were in November before the restrictions arose, and we're looking into a pretty good summer. Overall, our expectations for 2022 would be that revenues would come in, give or take 85 to 90% of 2019 levels. First half depressed, second half very good. But of course, all that assuming all things remain as they are, stable and improving, of course, in the situation with Omicron.
I was about to say, what is your degree of certainty around all of this? What kind of volatility do you think you may see in some of these figures?
Look, if I've learned anything throughout the last 2 years is only to focus on the things that we do control. The one thing that we do not control is COVID-19, and every time we think that it is contained, something else comes up. But I think the indications are this should be a much more stable year. And I think it's also clear that governments around the world, people have learned that international travel can operate safely. We have a program of Fly Safe, Fly Well, and the need to curb travel as a means, and the only means almost sometimes, other than domestic measures, to curb the impact of COVID-19, I think, is now receding. So it should be a more normal year. I'm not saying the new normal. I don't believe in that. Just a more normal year with travel back at scale. But it will take time to get back to where we were in 2019.
What will travel feel like this year? When I get on an airplane, when I go through an airport, when I visit a destination, what will it feel like, do you think?
Well, first, right now, there's a lot of paperwork, and I think that should also be reduced dramatically as people get to terms with the new situation. But there's a lot of paperwork. People want to know the status of your vaccine, where you're going to be, what have you tested. So that's one thing. People, of course, are wearing masks, as they should, throughout the airports and on our planes. And when you're on a plane, the planes are absolutely cleaner, but the service is the same. We have people. We say that our people learn to smile through their eyes rather than just through their faces. I think you feel growingly that it's something that you're used to, but there's a level of apprehension of passengers who have not traveled for a long period of time coming back. But I can tell you that it is safe. Throughout the pandemic, we've really taken exceptional measures to ensure that the planes are clean, that we provide masks and things to make the travel more convenient and more secure. But overall, it's the same old flight, just a different sensation for the people coming on our planes.
You mentioned business a moment ago. Business travel has been very restricted. Again, what does demand look like? You have a very strong leisure component in terms of your mix. but give us an idea of what you think business is going to look like, particularly on the North Atlantic.
Yeah, so the one thing I would say is exactly the shape of business travel is very hard to predict. But I can tell you that right now, business travel is about 30% in terms of the tickets we're selling for, we ask customers what the purpose of travel is, and 30% is really right now on business. I think in 2022, we'll see a growing state of that. In our predictions, there will be changes to travel. Maybe the day trip that people did to a city in Europe or just a day trip to New York or Boston may not be in the cards, but there'll be longer trips, more meaningful trips. And I have no doubt that this cliche, which kind of works, that people do business with people and not with companies, is a true indication of where things are going to go. So how exactly it shapes up, I do not know, but I am pretty confident that more and more business travelers will be back traveling to their colleagues, their partners, their teams. It's just a necessity of good business.
You talked fairly positively about how things are going to develop this year. You mentioned, though, the degree of certainty you have about what's going to happen and how difficult it is to predict what the story is going to look like. Do you now have the business model, the balance sheets, the operating structure to be able to cope with that? How different is the business, and is it now built for this more volatile environment?
Well, look, our story of fight for survival through the pandemic is well documented, and rightly so, because it was really testament to the people of Virgin Atlantic and the stakeholders of Virgin Atlantic that we are here in a pretty good state. During 2020 and 2021, we did a 1.5 billion pound recapitalization of Virgin Atlantic, and it was capped in December with a 400 million pound investment by our shareholders, Virgin Group and Delta Airlines. So we're entering 2022 in a very good position in terms of our cash, our resilience, and the business model. Now, we've done dramatic changes to Virgin Atlantic by necessity and by design. We've gone further than any other airline to ensure that we're fit for purpose for the future and future volatility, because it may or likely to come. So, we took some drastic measures to improve our cost base. We reduced it by over 300 million pounds. And our job is really to ensure that demand, when it recovers, we're there to serve it, that we contain our costs, but of course, continue to provide the exceptional service that our people do day in, day out.
One of the things that kept the business going throughout the pandemic, you've mentioned the cash injections, but the other one was what is happening with cargo. Supply chains remain a huge challenge. What is your perspective?
Look, our cargo business did phenomenally well and continues to do that because, supply chains, for example, in Hong Kong are still disrupted, China disrupted, containers are in the wrong places, and people, really want to move goods and services much quicker than they were used to in normal times. Our cargo business really doubled its business and continues to do that. December was still a record month, for our cargo business. But the more we start to recover passenger business, unfortunately means that there is less space for cargo on our planes. So overall, it will be a declining business, but that's a good sign overall because it means that passengers have returned to the skies.
Yeah, we'll look forward to that. The volatility has obviously caused huge challenges when it comes to people management as well. How have you repurposed your staffing? How do you think about staffing going forward as you work through the rest of this year? We're already seeing the impact in terms of Omicron, in terms of outages, people not being able to turn up for work. Is that something that persists? Also, in terms of the volatile demand, how are you reimagining your labor story?
Yeah, so in 2020 we reduced our staff by 45%, and that was devastating for so many people that did nothing wrong other than caught up in the impacts of COVID-19. But we did some innovative things. We moved 2,000 of our cabin crew and about 500 of our pilots into what was called a holding pool. which meant that when demand returns, we would be able to get them back to work for Virgin Atlantic. And I'm really happy to say that over 1,000 cabin crew and already 150 pilots have returned, and more pilots will be returning in H1. Not only that, we actually this week announced that we're recruiting 400 new cabin crew to Virgin Atlantic to really serve the customers and get to full capacity. So I think we have really invested in our people to ensure that we're here to be at full capacity this summer. And again, like I said, we must recognize that it's the people of Virgin Atlantic that have ensured that we get through this in a very good position for the return of international travel scale in 2022.
Do you think some of those challenges will persist as the virus becomes endemic? It is going to become part and parcel of life. We're already seeing governments reducing quarantine periods. How do you think about the kind of volatility you're going to see in staffing going forward? Is it going to remain more elevated?
Look, over the Christmas period, we have absence of staff due to clearly the circumstances of either being close to people with COVID or having COVID, but we were able to operate most of our schedule. Of course, we made some tactical decisions to ensure that we were in a good place. And I do expect this to continue for a bit of time. But the bigger problem or the bigger issue facing economies is that there is shortage of great people out there. Demand is high for talented people, which we have many. And not just at Virgin Atlantic, which we are fully staffed and not really the problem itself. But if you look at the ecosystem in which we operate, demand for people at the Heathrow location, demand for people who provide services and goods to the airline so that we can provide it onwards. There is a demand for good people, and that, I think, will continue. And, of course, the other thing is high inflation, which impacts labor and creates greater mobility. We've seen the Great Resignation in the United States with 4.5 million people resigning just in December. So that gives you the scale of the issue. This is not going to go away, I don't believe, in the next few months. And it's something that we're insulated as Virgin Atlantic because of the brand that we have, but in the ecosystem that we work, it has a major impact.
How does inflation affect the airline sector? You talked about what's happening in the labor market. Wages presumably will have to go up if you want to attract talent. But more broadly, how do you think the inflationary environment is going to affect what you do? Are you going to be able to pass this on in terms of higher prices? Are you price makers or are you price takers?
Well, I think aviation is a hugely competitive industry, and it tends to be, I would say, price taker rather than a price maker. So we will have to continue to be efficient, continue to ensure that our cost base that we have restructured over the pandemic, it remains a competitive advantage. But inflationary costs and containing them is a major risk, not just to an airline, but to everyone in industry right now. And not all of it can be contained. So I'm assuming that we will need to pass some of it on in the form of prices, and indeed yields are a bit up, but that's because of the demand for tickets and this kind of demand. But this, I don't think it's as transitory as people are thinking. It may persist for another year, definitely to 22, maybe beyond, and all of us just need to become more efficient.
I want to talk about the impact on the kind of sustainability transition when it comes to that inflationary story in just a moment. But you mentioned the Great Resignation in the United States just a moment ago as well. We are seeing a shift in the places that people live and work in the United States in particular. I noticed you just launched that route down to Austin in Texas. Texas is one of the areas that's benefiting from this. People are moving down from New York into Florida. They're moving out of California into Texas and elsewhere. Do you think the route map, do you think the geography of the networks in the States are going to change as a result of this? And how do you adapt?
Yeah, so first, indeed, we've just announced the launch of Austin, Texas, the first U.S. or the new destination in the U.S. for the last 5 years. And, I think this hybrid working changes a bit where people are living as well. So they can, combine, of course, their work and make potentially a different or a better lifestyle in their perspective. Austin has emerged as a tech hub, a media hub, just a place of interest in terms of a greater metropolitan area. So together with our partner Delta and, of course, with Air France-KLM, we have one of the deepest connectivity into the United States and North America, and, of course, into Europe. And our job is to connect people, families, businesses, friends, events, and we'll fly where the demand is. It's an exciting period to go into Texas, and we will find possibly new locations. But with our deep network in the East Coast and the West Coast, we simply follow the demand, and we're here to serve passengers wherever they need us.
Let's get back to the inflation story, if we might, in the few remaining minutes that we have, and connect it to the sustainability story. Isabel Schnabel over at the ECB talking the other day about how the energy transition is going to be hugely inflationary. How is the aviation industry, given the stresses and strains that we've seen as a result of the pandemic, going to be able to deliver what is required of it in terms of the energy transition? What can this industry actually afford to deliver, do you think?
Well, clearly sustainability is a major issue for any airline and for really any person on this planet. I would say the first thing that an airline needs to do is it's the quest for efficiency, and efficiency is gained by having the youngest fleet in the sky. We've made those investments, and actually 2022 is an exciting year. We're going to have the first of the A339neos coming in, which are a further indication of this new generation of airplanes, and they are 30 to 40% more efficient than the 747s and the A340s that we had. So we have the youngest fleet across the Atlantic, or one of the youngest fleets across the Atlantic, and that is a dramatic reduction in fuel. It will be 30% by the time we get to 2030 versus the previous fleet that we had. Second, of course, is sustainable aviation fuel, and that is a dramatic challenge, not just for airlines, but for the oil majors and for society in large. The technological solution may exist, but the scale-up has not been proven. And we need to see hundreds of times more capacity for sustainable aviation fuel made available over the next the next 5 to 10 years for all of us to meet the net zero commitments we've made for 2050. And that, of course, will come at a price because it's not cheaper. It's actually probably more expensive. But I believe that corporations will want to fly airlines that are more sustainable. I think consumers will discriminate on that basis. And I think it's not just the airlines that will have to foot the bill for flying a more sustainable fuel. It's going to be shared by all stakeholders in this massive and important equation.
How do you plug new technology like eVTOL into the story as well? New technology is emerging at a fairly granular level in terms of aviation. And I'm wondering how you and other airlines, I talk to plenty of airlines, and they're trying to figure this out right now, how electric technology, how vertical takeoff and landing technology becomes part of the network.
Yeah, and I'll start again with the honest truth. For long-haul planes across the Atlantic, electric planes will not be a solution in the next 10, 20, or probably 30 years. Neither would be technologies that replace the jet engines that we know. But we're very excited by eVTOLs. Specifically, we've partnered with Vertical, and we have an option to buy up to 150 planes from them. But that is to solve the first mile to the 100 miles. So connecting from, for instance, Cambridge to Heathrow, from Brighton to Heathrow or Gatwick, from Leeds to Manchester. And then once you have that solved, you can actually do an intercity connectivity between cities, so a network in itself. So we're very excited about that. But for us, it's really about the first and last 100 miles, electrifying that and providing a service that then attaches to our planes as they go across the Atlantic, or, of course, to Asia and Africa.
So it's always a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for your time. Looking into 2022, understanding what is going to happen with Virgin Atlantic, the aviation industry, and the wider economy. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for it. Shai Weiss, the CEO of Virgin Atlantic.